finding self-care that actually cares for yourself. So we're going to talk about self-care a little bit here today because it is very important for those of us who are ambitious people, which is all of you who are listening to me. We know that perfectionism hits us really hard. The taskmaster inner critic hits us really hard. And we try to fight self-care because we believe that productivity and constantly being inside of our work is the only way that we can be successful. But I'm here to tell you that rest is essential to being successful, because burnout don't get you nowhere, but really far away from your goals. Trust me. Okay, so the purpose of self-care is to care for yourself. Now, I think that there's been a lot of misconception about self-care, in that self-care is supposed to be a way for you to treat yourself, which is like, don't get me wrong, I love to treat myself. I absolutely believe that you should treat yourself. But treating yourself and doing things that care for yourself are two different things. Treating yourself can be part of your self-care, but your self-care doesn't always need to be treating yourself. So when we talk about self-care, if it's not something that's been on the docket, or it's, we're talking about taking rest, we're talking about learning to care for ourselves, when we don't know what to do, where do we turn? Google! Google tells us everything. That's a bad idea. I know that Google has a lot of answers, but it does not have all the answers. I'm going to ask you to do something different. Instead of immediately turning to Google to figure out what your self-care should be, turn to yourself first. What are some of the reasons that people don't ask themselves about self-care first, right? So let's go back when I was talking in the beginning of this episode about how when you were a kid, during your development, people are always telling you what to do. So when you're trying to figure out what it is you should do for your self-care, you're like, I don't know, it's like someone told me I should do self-care to begin with. So someone else should tell me what to do for my self-care, right? And that's a fair point, actually. When I said it out loud, I was like, that's actually a fair point. Someone told you to do self-care, so then you're like, okay, but can you also tell me what to do? But in actuality, your self-care is personalized to who you are, in the same way that your self-confidence is personalized to who you are, right? What makes me feel confident may not make you feel confident at all. What makes me feel cared for may not make you feel cared for at all. I always go back to that example of mani-pedis. People are always like, oh, I love getting mani-pedis. I love it. It's like, if it's such good self-care. And I'm like, absolutely not. I do not. I do not feel cared for when other people groom me. I like to be groomed. Like, I like I like sitting and like picking out new nail polish and like, doing my nails and then being like, look at my nail. They're so cute, right? But like having someone else do that for me isn't as fulfilling. I don't feel cared for, but I do feel cared for when I do it on myself, right? So when we ask ourselves, what makes me feel cared for, then we can engage those things. And when we are looking externally for answers to self-care, this is where we get people who believe that like the self-care is a myth, right? It doesn't actually do anything. And it's like, well, that's because you're doing self-care that was for somebody else's care. It was a suggestion that somebody gave you because it makes them feel cared for. So if it didn't do the same thing for you, that's fine. It doesn't mean that self-care isn't real or doesn't work. It just means that we need to figure out what your self-care activities are and how to make them a part of your life. So I talk in depth about this entire process in episode 24 of Women of Color and Confidence. It's titled The Essential Self-Care Practices for Maintaining Your Self-Confidence. But here today, I'm going to make this long story very, very, very short so that you get the idea. But if you want specifically how to do this whole process, go listen to episode 24. First, we start by asking ourselves, hey self, hey Amber Rose. Now you say it. Okay, perfect. What makes me feel cared for? How do I feel cared for? Some of the things that make me feel cared for is having enough drinkable water in the house. It's for real though. When I'm out of water in the house, I'm like, why didn't I take care of myself by getting more water to put in my house? Other things are getting enough sleep. Other things are having fresh flowers around, cooking myself meals, doing activities or hobbies that make me feel happy, things that I can do with my hands. I like crocheting, I like embroidery, right? Reading a book, writing. Oh my gosh, whenever I make time to write, I'm like, now that's how we take care of ourselves. Yes, I feel so pumped when I make that time, right? So it isn't about Googling suggestions. It's about sitting down with yourself and saying, what makes me feel cared for? And then incorporating those things into your life. Okay. Remember I said this is very, very long story, very short. Okay. So I'm not going to tell you how to incorporate those things into your life. But what I can say is that I understand that we've gotten to this point where we believe that self-care practices are mostly expensive or time consuming. Okay. And some of them may be. And there's a time and a place for those self-care practices that are expensive and time consuming. But our self-care practices range from, I want you to think of it on a scale. So at one end, we have those activities that are very little to maybe even little to no money, time, and effort. And then you travel all the way to the other side of the spectrum, where at the other end, you have self-care activities that take a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of effort. Okay, it's this big sliding scale. And you have self-care activities that fit on every level of that scale. So first we need to figure out what all of your self-care activities are that make you feel really good. Okay. One of my no money, no time, no effort self-care activities is journaling for at least 10 minutes every morning, drinking either my pre-workout, before workout, or drinking my tea. That's it. That's what I do. 10 minutes a day, self-care done, right? On the other end of it, some of my self-care activities are like a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of effort, are like traveling, girls trips, birthday trips, cruises. But I haven't been on a cruise. I want to go on a cruise. That's why I said that. I'm excited. But it takes time and it takes money and it takes effort to go on a big trip like that, right? But then in between, I have self-care activities that some of them are on the lower end, some of them are on the higher end, and some of them are in the middle, right? Being able to take time to sit down and write takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of time, no money, right? Making a date to meet my friend at the beach so that we can go swimming together. Some time, some effort, a little bit of money, pay for gas, maybe buy some snacks, okay, right? Maybe I want to go do a class in the city, right? It's going to take some money. It's going to take some time. It's going to take some effort, but it's not something that I have to do every day. I can do it once a week or once a month, right? So there are all of these things that can be included in your self-care that are on this scale. And what you have to figure out first is what they are, and then you put them in the appropriate places of your life and your schedule, right? And spoiler alert, self-care is a daily habit. But the reason that you're not doing it every day is, one, you haven't found self-care that actually cares for yourself, and two, all of it, the self-care activities that you're looking at are on the more expensive, more time-consuming side of the scale rather than the sliding scale that's in the middle. Okay, so this self-care that cares for yourself is actually point number 13 in the Overcome Your Insecurities audio guide. I go into much more detail about how to create that list and then how to put it into your life, and then how to implement all of those self-care activities that are on your list into the appropriate places into your life and into the schedule.